Welcome to the woods. My name is Bobby Goulding and I am a commercial director, photographer and DP from London. Due to the current lockdown, I'd like to spend a little bit of time getting back into photography, film photography specifically, which I used to do about 10, 12 years ago or so. I have decided to make this my subject matter as it's pretty much the only thing I've got access to at the minute. Today I'm thinking to test out a couple of different film stocks and I just thought it'd be interesting to share on YouTube. Now the forest is quite a challenging environment to photograph because you've got like light canopies, dark shadows, etc. going on in the background down below. And I just want to test out the range and the colours of a few different film stocks to see what's going to fit me best. I've also been shooting a bit of black and white recently as well. But of course, there's lots of colour in the forest, there's lots of interesting subject matter that I think requires some colour to really bring it to life. So today I'm going to test out a few different colour films, so let's get straight to it. Just come across this great little spot. It's kind of exactly what I'm looking for, to be honest. So you've got this incredible tree in the middle, this essentially the centerpiece. Quite a nice open clearing here, relatively even light. There are some dark shadows in and around here because I want to try and test out how much the shadow detail can hold against the sky detail, which I'm probably going to frame up around here. And also just these kind of light greens I think are really nice against this reddy brown kind of floor. So probably not a masterpiece. By no means, it's not really what I'm looking for today. It's more to find a scene where I can test a few different film stocks out, and I'm going to show you which film stocks I've got. Right, so, wow, that's a low angle. I'm not moving that now. I've just found some reading glasses, which I don't need. So I've got Kodak Ektar 100, Kodak E100, which is slide film. This is colour neg. In the third back, Kodak Portra 160. 3 backs, 1 camera, 6:4:5 format. It's all going to be on the tripod. I'm going to frame up the same composition and switch the backs out. I've got this tree as my hero in the middle, and this is all going to be falling off into the background on the left side here and the right side of the frame here. I'll try and show you through the viewfinder, but I don't think you're going to get that great of a view. Yeah, unsurprising. I've got the Mamiya Sekor C 55mm on here. It's giving me a relatively wide angle, around 30mm, equivalent on 35mm frame. Starting on the Kodak Ektar 100. Now I'm switching to the Kodak Portra 160. And finally the Kodak E100. I got my negatives back from the lab. I'm pretty happy with those. I've scanned them in with the Epson V850 Pro behind me. I know you've already seen the pictures in the video, but what I'd like to do is just take a little bit more of a deep dive into the images and compare between them to get an idea of how the film stocks differ in that particular environment. The primary reason I did it is so that I can decide which of those particular film stocks that I would like to use again in that situation. Now, of course, it's quite subjective. Some people may prefer one stock over another for a certain scenario, and that's fine. For me, I'm looking for the maximum amount of dynamic range because of the high contrast scenario of being inside of a forest. Also, something else that I am looking for is a colour palette. Now, I'm really looking for something in the middle. I don't want anything too washy and I don't want anything too strong. I want something relatively realistic, but also something with a look, so I don't have to do too much in post. I'm not a big fan of doing a great deal of work to film images in post. I feel that one of the advantages of shooting film is that it gives you a level to work with in the first place. I have shot in similar environments with digital. I own a 5DS, which I love. The dynamic range on that camera is fantastic. The colours are fantastic. But for this kind of work with film, where I've got a bit more time and control to work in an environment, I just wanted to run through these film stocks and see which one ticks all the boxes for me. Kodak E100, which I used in the test, I've never shot before, so I'm really interested to see how that comes out. I've never been a huge fan of slide film, and of course with slide having a lower dynamic range, it wouldn't have been my first point of call for this kind of shot, but I thought I'd try it anyway, given that I could put it up against some colour print films and see how it stands up. With that said, let's take a look at the images and see how they compare. To start off, I'm looking at the Ektar 100 from Kodak. Ektar is pinned as being the landscape photography film. Being a colour print film, straight away I know that it's got a good dynamic range. Apparently slightly less than Portra, so that'll be interesting to compare here. But straight away what I do like is the way that it renders the greens. The greens don't feel too saturated, they feel fairly natural. The greens in the scene themselves were pretty bright, but they were quite pastel coloured, and I feel that that's captured this quite well. The shadow areas have retained a decent amount of detail. Now I did meter across these 3 shots for the shadow area of the tree. I placed that down on zone 2, so I've got some decent shadow detail but still rendering it relatively dark. I do quite like the reds in the foreground in the forest floor. I think the reds are nice there. You can start to see at the top of the image towards the left of the tree that the highlights are starting to blow out there, but I still feel that it's quite a pleasant rendering of the highlights considering the amount of range in there from the deep shadows at the bottom of the tree all the way up to the highlights at the top. I'm happy with that. I really like the contrast and saturation levels across this image. This for me feels like the right kind of balance. Let's move on to Portra and see how that compares against the Ektar. What I notice here, which I'm not particularly keen on, is the greens feel very unified throughout the image. There doesn't seem to be much yellow in the green. It feels quite green, even starting to go into the shadows. And that red in the forest floor to the foreground of the image seems to be gone to me. It's by no means a bad rendering of the scene. It's just not what I was wanting. I was wanting a bit more warmth in the forest floor to contrast against the cooler shades of the trees and the green forest canopy. You can see at the top of the image that the highlights seem to have held slightly better, but for me this is negligible. And even the shadow detail in the front of the tree seems very comparable to me. So personally, I wouldn't be too worried about putting Ektar 100 up against Kodak 160 Portra in terms of trying to get a similar dynamic range. And moving on now to the Kodak E100 slide film, and wow, what a difference. Of course, slide film is known for its increased saturation, and that can clearly be seen here. The greens at the top of the canopy for me are a little bit too far beyond what I was hoping for. In all fairness, this is relatively true to the scene. I feel that across the board there is too much yellow saturation that comes through the greens and the whole image begins to feel too saturated. Again, it's not to say that this is a bad rendering of the scene, it's just for me subjectively it wasn't really what I was hoping for. I would probably use this in another scenario where there wasn't quite as much unified colour such as the green, because that really starts to take over. I'm also pretty impressed with the dynamic range on this shot. You can see that the highlights are starting to blow out a little bit more in that same area of tree canopy. And the blacks in the front of the tree are definitely more inky. I was thinking it wouldn't be able to hold that much detail. I haven't actually done a stop test on this to find out how many stops of dynamic range there is within E100, and in fact I haven't really researched it. So if anybody has done that test, maybe if you could pop that in the comments, that'd be really useful. I may do that at some other point. But as a conclusion for the E100, I'm pretty impressed by that range. I would definitely use that film again. The colours are great. As I say, it's just more the fact that I've got lots of the same colour in one scene and I wouldn't want that to overtake. That was a pretty interesting test for me. Hopefully that was useful for you in some way. In summary, for me, the Ektar really steals the show in terms of what I was after. The more people use film, the more likelihood of manufacturers looking to release new stocks. Of course, Kodak E100 was a relatively new release, so my fingers are crossed for the future that potentially manufacturers might start to release new stock. That would be amazing. I'm aware that that was by no means a conclusive test. I just wanted to take a quick look and thought it would be interesting to share that. If anyone's got any further comments or questions, then leave them in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching the video. My channel is pretty new here, so I'd really appreciate if you guys enjoyed the content, just hit the subscribe button, hit the like button or leave a comment. That would be greatly appreciated. Take care and I'll speak to you soon.